Welcome to another YOUnite video, and this time we want to cover another use case. And this one will be about one of the directions that Master Data Management, or MDM, is going. And in a prior video that we posted called The 3 Mental Hernias of Master Data Management, we talked about how MDM stakeholders often confuse the role of MDM. And the first point in that presentation is that we, IT stakeholders, always take an application-centric view of systems, even when we are looking at the overall design of our IT topology. For example, we might have mobile device or browser user interfaces talking to a microservice that takes user input such as purchases and then stores that data into a relational database. Or we may have an in-house service that stores product definitions and their associated parts lists that takes input from a number of product design tools. In these examples, we're thinking about how the data comes into our ecosystems and is stored in these two source systems. But MDM forces us to think about what we do with the data that is stored in these source systems and how it moves outwards or is synchronized to other systems. So what source systems hold the master records or records of truth, and which systems are they synchronized out to? For example, these purchases or these products. Or to put it another way, MDM forces data analysts, programmers, and application architects to what we call think backwards about the flow of data, and it is often a point of confusion when designing apps. These stakeholders need to be mindful of both the flow of application data into the source systems and then the additional flow of how the source data moves or should move from these source systems out to other source systems and data stores. Another common misconception when taking on MDM initiatives is that IT stakeholders think users directly log into the MDM platform and enter in master data such as purchases or products, and they don't. Users enter data as they always have. The MDM platform moves the data from source systems like these and synchronizes the data out to other data stores or source systems. And just as a side note, traditional MDM often consumes this data and makes it available or pushes it out in a batch process, where more modern MDM federated platforms like YOUnite can take the events and push them out in real time. There's a lot of momentum around the direction that MDM is going with machine learning and how it can be leveraged to ease MDM configuration and management by performing discovery operations on both the massive amounts of data in the IT ecosystem and the data's associated models or schemas. But we're going to talk about another direction we think MDM is going to move. And as we said before, MDM forces you to think differently about the data in the IT ecosystem. And we talked about how users don't directly interact with the MDM platform, but we're going to break from that practice that we just went to all the trouble of explaining, because this is where the generally very dry topic of MDM starts to get really interesting. And the reason why this is so interesting is that one of the promises of computing is that a user should be able to update their information once in one place and have it shared to anyone and anything they wish. In other words, people in control of their own data. But the current model is broken. Now, users have to hand off their information about themselves to another authority who controls who it is to be shared with. This flies in the face of the spirit of the new data privacy laws such as GDPR in the European Union. So, for example, if I update my contact information, or if I get a new degree or certificate, or if I start a new job, I should be able to instantly share this with whoever I want to share it with and with whoever is interested in me. And you may be saying to yourself that there are these amazing platforms out there for connecting people, such as LinkedIn and Facebook. But there are 3 common problems with these platforms. And number 1, users can be crazy or just make mistakes or be malicious, and they can pretty much enter anything they want to inside an online community or job site. And so it's difficult to validate a user's education and work history on a job site platform or community such as Monster or even LinkedIn. And number 2, another problem is, who is this platform sharing your information with? And number 3, the biggest problem of all is this online presence of an individual really the person that they say they are? So let's start with our use case. And this will be around an individual being able to control who can see their education and work history and addressing the 3 issues above and some additional critical master data issues. And there are 2 terms I'll be using for this use case. And number 1 is local education authority or agency, and that can be abbreviated as LEA. And this is used to describe a school, college, trade school, anything that can issue a transcript, diploma, degree, certificate, etc. Number 2 are lifelong learners, and this describes basically everyone, from students to the employee adding to their job experience or those looking for work. So in our use case, we have Layla, our lifelong learner, that when in high school, she attended 2 different high schools and received her high school diploma and received academic and scholarly awards at both high schools. And then she attended 2 different junior colleges while receiving her general education certificate for a bachelor's degree. Then Layla attended a state college and performed 2 internships, one at an accounting firm and another at Walmart. And upon completion of college, Layla received a Bachelor of Arts degree in finance. After Layla received her degree, she went to work full-time at Walmart in finance, and after working 2 years at Walmart, Walmart offered to pay for an MBA if she agreed to work on it part-time while continuing to work full-time. Now let's say Layla earned her MBA and worked for Walmart for a couple more years, and during a recession, Walmart planned to consolidate their financial operations, and she was asked to relocate. So Layla is not sure if she wants to relocate since she has her young family, and she's currently living in North Carolina, but would consider moving to Seattle since she and her husband have family there. A typical next step would be for her to update her resume and reach out to a professional network. Maybe put her resume out on some job boards and update her LinkedIn page and get in touch with a few recruiters. But wouldn't it be great if Layla could take advantage of a lifelong learning platform that would be an authenticated exchange of information between lifelong learners looking for work and the education authorities and work organizations that matter to a lifelong learner such as Layla, but most importantly, with the exchange of records under Layla's control. So let's take a look at the topology of our lifelong learning platform, and at the core there is a federated master data management system along with a front-facing web service and authentication services. And on the periphery, we have local education authorities and for-profit and nonprofit work organizations. So when Layla was in high school, she was part of this education authority, and she opted into the lifelong learning platform. Then she was authenticated at her high school and given a lifelong learner ID. So she has an ID in the authentication system, and there's a front-facing portal that lifelong learners can log into. So let's go through a flow here, and let's say Layla, who is working at Walmart, is going to apply for a job at Boeing. But before I jump ahead here in the lifelong learning platform is a lifelong learner master record for each lifelong learner. So there is some personal information like addresses and phone numbers, perhaps a photo that the lifelong learner can choose to keep up to date. And most importantly, there's a number of education and employment documents, but these aren't the documents themselves, but pointers or links to where they're stored in at the education authorities and work organizations. So Layla can log in and she can control the access to these records or documents. So if Boeing asks Layla, "We'd like to see your work and educational history," Layla can log into the platform and grant Boeing access to the information that she wants to share with Boeing. Then when Boeing makes the request for Layla's lifelong learner record, the request is granted because Boeing has been given permission by Layla, and the lifelong learning platform can request and assemble the lifelong learner record and deliver it in a response back to Boeing. This is done where none of the information is permanently stored inside of the lifelong learning platform, and the documents being transmitted are being done so at the direction of Layla. Another really important step is to guarantee document accuracy and to employ something like blockchain or a similar pattern. So when Layla is granted her ID, she's provided a public and private key, And obviously, all these organizations over here have their public and private keys, so the documents can be hashed and signed and possibly treated as a block and added to a chain. But since there is a single authority and we don't need to have a 51% quorum validation requirement for blocks, this might be unnecessary since the Lifelong Learner platform knows who these education authority and work organizations are, and because the Lifelong Learning platform issues the certificates and keys to them, and most importantly, to Layla. Blockchain is an elegant and scalable technology, but it may add complexities to a use case like this that aren't necessary. But then, after all the requirements are vetted, perhaps blockchain would make better sense. And another really powerful point about federated master data management is that entities can keep each other up to date in real time. And this goes to the point we were making before about how master data management forces you to think backwards, when normally we are focused on how to keep the critical data in the systems in our enterprise in sync with each other. Well, in this case, it's the end user that's allowing the other entities to stay up to date with her information. So for example, if Layla noticed that some information about her was wrong in her education record here at Education Authority 6, which is where she got her master's degree, she could choose to allow the access control to remain open so that as Education Authority 6, let's call it Duke, makes changes to her transcripts, Boeing will get the changes in real time. And as Layla works with Boeing, she can choose to keep these access controls open, so if there are any other changes, they could be sent to Boeing in real time. Or if Layla chooses to update her personal information like home address and mobile phone number, and Boeing chooses to trust that information, her home address and phone numbers can be kept up to date with Boeing and any other entities that Layla chooses, but not in others that she chooses not to share information with. So let's get back to our use case. So now we can see how Layla can choose which education authorities and former employers can add to her lifelong learner record, and she can choose to share this information with whomever she wants. And the recipient gets Layla's information knowing it is validated and true. So this approach solves the problems we talked about earlier. The first being the problem around people entering educational and work history information about themselves that is inaccurate. Because the lifelong learner does not directly supply the records about their education or their work history, and that the records are tamper-proof, they can be certified as true. The second was dealing with online communities that sell information on its users. People do not like their information out there in the internet, where it can be misused. Partnering with a trusted government agency in the federated model would greatly assure the lifelong learner that their information was being properly protected. First, the trusted government agency, not being focused on the profit motive, is mandated to keep the user information private. And second, the platform is federated, meaning it does not retain any of the underlying education and work records. Thirdly, the authentication is solved because we know users for who they really are, since schools in general have to authenticate every student. Also, the policy could be that students aren't automatically added to the lifelong learning platform, but must opt in. But there still are other issues around MDM that need to be resolved. Number one is data normalization. In other words, we have many education authorities that store similar data about students, such as date of enrollment, courses taken, diplomas, certificates, degrees, etc. But the education authorities often store this information differently. And the same goes for employers regarding work history. So until there is a universal data format standard adopted for education and work history, the lifelong learning platform can attach PDFs or other document formats of transcripts and work history to the lifelong learner record with the appropriate metadata. The second MDM issue is that traditional MDM says we create a golden record and store it in our MDM platform or designated store, which means all of this education and work history is stored in a single system, which is a cause of concern with the trust issues around the social media companies and breaches at large organizations such as Equifax. But modern MDM platforms such as YOUnite use a federated or registry-style approach where the data is not stored in the MDM system, or in this case, the lifelong learning platform. It just knows where our lifelong learners' education and employment data resides, and with Layla's consent and direction, the Federated platform will gather the requested information from the participating education authorities and employment organizations to deliver it to the entity, school, or potential employer Layla has requested. So let's use our example from our topology diagram where Layla applied for a job at Boeing, or even better, Layla made her lifelong learner record available to prospective employers, and then Boeing contacted her. So Boeing asked for background information such as past jobs and education. Normally the applicant would fill it all in, and Boeing would have to accept the information as is or do some background checking on the applicant. However, under our proposal, Layla would simply direct the Lifelong Learning Exchange to see the relevant portions of her lifelong learner record. I say relevant because, as we described in the topology, Layla is in control of her record access, and she directs which educational authorities and which employment documents Boeing can view. And the records are known to be true and correct because they are coming through the Lifelong Learning Exchange from the education authorities and employee organizations themselves. In other words, when Boeing makes the request for Layla's lifelong learner record, all the documents are encrypted, assembled in real time, and transmitted to Boeing, and Boeing uses its private key to decrypt the documents. So to review, a lifelong learning platform coupled with Federated MDM can provide some exciting new ways to look at MDM. It provides a single point of control for the true owner of the information, in this case, the lifelong learner. It gives the contributors to the individual lifelong learner record, the education authorities and employee organizations, a way to provide tamper-proof validated education and work histories. Lifelong learners like Layla control what they share, but the records themselves can't be modified by Layla. If the lifelong learning platform is a government agency, it has no monetary motivation and can be mandated from sharing or selling information with other entities. It solves the authentication issue since the lifelong learner begins at schools which perform student authentication and can assign the lifelong learner ID. Federated Master Data Management solves the issue of creating a single repository for all education and work records. The data stays where it belongs, at the education authority or work organization, until the lifelong learner directs its release. It's worth noting that education authorities and employee organizations can always opt out of the lifelong learning platform, knowing that the lifelong learning platform never retained any of its student or employee school or work records in the exchange. And of course, our use case has to have a happy ending. And it just so happened that Boeing in Seattle was looking for financial analysts, but needed to make a quick decision to fill the job. Unfortunately, Layla's validated work and school history made it to Boeing quickly, accurately, and electronically, so Boeing was able to make a decision on Layla right away. And Layla, her husband, and child were able to relocate to Seattle to be near their family. An additional very important use case that this federated lifelong learning platform can provide is the very real need to exchange transcripts and documents between education authorities. For example, when students transfer to new schools or apply to colleges. If you want to find out more about YOUnite and its federated master data management capabilities, visit the YOUnite website or contact sales@younite.us. And if you wouldn't mind, give us a thumbs up if you like this. And as always, thank you very much for watching.